The future of war and peace in Europe may hinge on the next few hours when two men meet behind closed doors. Their temperaments and characters couldn't be more different, but their principles of power and how to wield it may be alarmingly aligned. Donald Trump had no smiles, just the wave as he boarded Air Force One early this morning. For the press pack, mid-air.
There's nothing set in stone. I want certain things. I want to see a ceasefire. This is not to do with Europe. Europe's not telling me what to do. But they're going to be involved in the process, obviously, as will Zelenskyy. But I want to see a ceasefire rapidly. I don't know if it's going to be today, but I'm not going to be happy if it's not today.
President Putin took his time traveling with a stopover in Russia's Far East. Unrushed, he went on a tour across Magadan, a former hub for Stalin's gulags. Next stop, the sleepy wilds of Alaska, where the seasons move slowly, and so do the moose. Both presidents have traveled halfway between Moscow and Washington. They've timed their arrivals to meet in the middle. Shortly, the talks will begin. A one-on-one meeting first, with only translators present. Then a wider negotiation lunch with both men and their delegations of diplomats. If all goes well at the airbase, a joint news conference will follow before they depart.
I'll know within the first 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, or 5 minutes, like we tend to find out, whether or not we're going to have a good meeting or a bad meeting. And if it's a bad meeting, it'll end very quickly. And if it's a good meeting, we're going to end up getting peace in the pretty near future, okay?
He believes that the same powers that got him re-elected will help him make peace where his predecessor failed. Self-belief may be his greatest asset and weakness. And just how skilled and prepared is his entourage? His senior diplomat, Steve Witkoff, who's been clocking up air miles between the Middle East and Russia, is a fellow real estate mogul from Manhattan. By contrast, the man who's been Russia's foreign minister for the last 21 years is already in Anchorage, wearing a shirt glorifying the Soviet Union, which went down very badly with Ukrainians.
We never plan ahead. We know that we have arguments, a clear, understandable position. We will present them.
Also here for the Russian team, tellingly, is the head of its sovereign wealth fund.
I think Americans are very clear that Ukraine issue needs to be resolved for any economic progress to be made.
The state of Alaska voted for Donald Trump in 3 presidential elections. But to these protesters in downtown Anchorage, that's a cause for shame, not celebration. They see today's summit as an alarming meeting of two authoritarian minds carving up the world between them.
We are here because Donald Trump invited a war criminal to our state and we're not down with it. Vladimir Putin is literally one of the most horrible people on the planet, and we want him nowhere near Alaska.
Even if this summit results in peace?
Anybody that has a stake in this war should be at the table, and Ukraine definitely has a stake in this war. There should be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine.
I'm offended as an Alaskan that a war criminal and a convicted felon chose Alaska to meet to talk about how to end a war in Ukraine.
When you say convicted felon, you're referring to Donald Trump?
I'm referring to Donald Trump, yes. And they have the audacity to come to our state and to sit down and talk about how to end a war in Ukraine without inviting Zelenskyy. It's appalling that they're here. It's appalling that they're not including Zelenskyy. And it's appalling that we are not, as a nation, arresting Putin when he should be facing war crimes charges.
What worries them is what worries Ukraine and much of Europe. That Russia and the United States have become far too close for comfort. And it's not just about geographical proximity. Now, as you heard there, Donald Trump has been speaking on board Air Force One. Let's go to our Washington correspondent, Paul McNamara. Paul.
Yeah, Matt, I'll caveat this by saying it's worth noting that when it comes to details at least, Donald Trump's views can be, shall we say, changeable. But if we take what he said on board Air Force One at face value, that is the most pro-Ukrainian messaging we have heard from Donald Trump. A week ago, there was consternation, not just in Ukraine, but across Europe, when he first used that phrase, land swaps. On board Air Force One, he was asked about territorial negotiations. He said, of course, that'll be discussed, but I've got to let Ukraine make that decision. That's a change in tone. He was also asked about peace, security and the US involvement, which he said was a maybe. He said the US could possibly supply guarantees to Ukraine, quote, along with Europe and other countries, but not in the form of NATO. There's a possibility. Again, that's a shift in position, and it has the potential to be a significant shift. You mentioned in your report there about the Russian finance ministers were coming on. There was a fear that all of a sudden this Russia-Ukraine summit might morph into a Russia-US trade summit. Again, Donald Trump said, yep, we can do that, but they're not doing business until we get the war settled. Now look, one criticism that's often been levelled at Donald Trump is that he sometimes adopts the position of the last person he spoke to. Well, European leaders will be overjoyed because going into this negotiation, he seems to be trumpeting their messaging. The question now is, how long will those thoughts ring true in his head, faced with 7 hours of a charm offensive and diplomatic onslaught from Vladimir Putin?
Paul in Washington, thank you very much indeed. And here's a quick reminder of what's at stake and indeed on the table after nearly a decade of war. 14 Russian troops invaded Ukraine, seizing and then annexing Crimea. And in Luhansk and Donetsk in the east, Russian-backed separatists seized large areas too. 8 years later, in 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion. Its troops seized large parts of Zaporizhia and Kherson, which remain divided by the front line to this day. Russia wants to claim the whole of Luhansk and Donetsk, but is reportedly offering to freeze the front lines in Zaporizhia and Kherson, allowing it to maintain a land bridge to Crimea. But it's not yet clear what President Trump's talk of land swaps will actually mean. And Ukraine has already said that any ceding of territory is against its constitution, a red line it simply won't cross. Europe has made various promises about defending Ukraine's territorial integrity, but what are its options? Well, joining me now, the former US ambassador to NATO, Kurt Volker. Kurt Volker, thank you very much for coming back on the program. You're watching this as closely as anyone else, and you know that part of the world really well as the players involved in it. What are you watching for? What's going to be the thing that you're most interested in the next few hours?
Okay, well, first, let's make an assumption about what Vladimir Putin is going to do. He's going to reject an immediate ceasefire. He's going to maintain all of his maximalist demands, and he's going to try to change the subject by talking about nuclear arms control or trade deals or gas or minerals or anything that he thinks might be enticing to Trump. So what we have to look for is, does President Trump stick to his guns and deliver a very firm message to Vladimir Putin? No deals until you stop the war, and you do a ceasefire first, and then we can talk. That's got to be the message from President Trump. And if not, then there must be those severe consequences that Trump has talked about. If Trump gets distracted or he gets a diluted message from Putin and goes along with it, then I think we are shifting the goalposts again. What Putin will try to come away with is to promise, okay, we'll do another meeting. We'll have this meeting. We're not going to agree here, but we'll have another meeting and we'll meet with Zelenskyy and we'll do that at some time. But the conditions are not right yet, so we got to work on those conditions. That would be just a recipe for postponing, kicking down the road, and getting the U.S. and Ukraine chasing rabbits down holes at Putin's direction, rather than keeping a firm line on just having a ceasefire.
Right, and do you think, from what you know about Donald Trump, that he can stick to the line that you just defined?
Well, I have a feeling that he's going to keep trying to figure out where the deal is. He'll understand that Putin is not ready to deal today. And so he's going to try to figure out, how do I get there? And I don't think he really wants to apply sanctions and tariffs that would impact Russia. So he's going to look for a way to then pitch this negotiation, pitch this engagement forward and make it sound like progress. But that is what I worry about, that this is really just giving Putin more time.
Well, and talking of time, I mean, Putin wants the time not just to deliver one of his long diatribes, but also, he can take his time in terms of the war. Donald Trump keeps repeating that he's a man in a hurry, Does that hurry help him?
Well, it's been 7 months of President Trump's presidency now, and day one still hasn't arrived. So we don't know. You know, Trump says he's in a hurry, but then he keeps kicking this down the road. I hope that he realizes that Putin's economy genuinely is weak. Putin is more vulnerable than he likes to admit in public, and we should be exploiting that. If that's the case, and then Trump is indeed in a hurry, then the way to speed this up is to apply immediate economic pressure on Russia right now.
Now, there are many people, and you've heard them in our pieces, and you may be one of them yourself, who are outraged that Zelenskyy is not at a table where the subject of discussion will be his own country. Do you think that he should have been invited? Would that have been possible, or was that a non-starter?
I think you can play it either way. I think it is sometimes useful to have a conversation with the Russians to convey to them what we can accept and what we can't accept in terms of a ceasefire and in terms of their withdrawal from territory, and to push on that. And it may be easier to do that bilaterally than straight in a trilateral meeting with Zelenskyy as well. It's only the end of the day that matters. In the end of the day, any deal has to be between Putin and Zelenskyy, not with President Trump. He can't agree to anything and expect Ukraine to deliver. It's going to have to be the Ukrainians that agree or disagree. So this may be a useful effort to stir the pot, get people engaged, get people talking, and see whether you can push it forward. But as part of that, it's very important that Trump hold that firm line that he talked about on Air Force One.
Okay. Ambassador Volker, thank you very much indeed. We'll, of course, be watching that runway very closely indeed. The plane is supposed to land, Trump's plane, in the next few minutes, and after that, Putin's plane. More from Anchorage later, as I said, but let's go to Kathy in Kyiv. Kathy.
Thanks, Matt. And despite the talks taking place in Alaska, there has been no let-up in Russia's attacks on Ukraine. Air raid sirens have been heard once again here in Kyiv, while one person died in a missile strike on the central city Dnipro, and another attack badly damaged the central food market in Sumy. President Zelenskyy is in no doubt of the message that sends.
The war continues. It continues precisely because there is no order, nor any indication that Moscow is prepared to end this war. On the day of the negotiations, they also kill people, and that says a lot.
Well, everywhere in this city, there are reminders of the war, from the rusting tanks behind me to the field of flags commemorating fallen soldiers down the road in Maidan Square. This country has paid a huge price in its fight to defend territory. And just to warn you, there are some distressing images in my report. In sombre defiance, they hold flags bearing the images of husbands, brothers, fathers and sons. At the American Embassy in Kyiv today, families of soldiers missing in action gathered to send their message to President Trump.
Nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine.
So how do you feel about the fact that this summit is going on without Ukraine present?
I think that meeting with a war criminal is like to give some concessions to him at the first place. Like, why talk to a war criminal who initiated the largest war conflict in Europe in 21st century? But if you do so, okay, then play your trump cards, use all your power and all your influence to pressure on the aggressor to end this war.
Do you want there to be a peace deal from Alaska, from the summit?
I don't think Putin is looking for a peace deal. He is looking for money, for business, and for Ukraine to be occupied, fully occupied by Russia.
These people know the true cost of this war. Natalia is here for her brother Andrei. He disappeared on his first frontline mission in February. She doesn't know if he's alive or dead, but she believes her country must keep fighting.
I think only because the price was so high, we have no other options but to carry on, because if we will stop, for what? All these young boys and girls, all these kids, all these older people died. For what? Not for peace.
Are you still hoping that Andrei is alive, that he'll come back to you?
I can tell you that I feel that he is, and I prefer to believe my feelings because that's all my family has for now.
And when you think of him, what do you think about? Tell us about Andrew.
I think that he is suffering. He is suffering, but he always protect me. Like I was always his younger sister, and being without him, for me as a person, for me as a girl here in Kyiv, this is very hard. But I'm standing for him, and I'm praying that one day he will be stand up for me once again.
It's been more than 3 years since the war began, but the brutality lingers. In the siege of Mariupol, families trapped in their basements melted snow for water to drink. Outside, bodies were left in the streets. That same year, another atrocity in Bucha, revealed to the world in April 2022 when Russian troops were pushed back. Nearly 500 Ukrainian civilians were killed, many tortured and buried in mass graves. The battle for Bakhmut ensued. For months, Ukrainian soldiers fought house to house. It became known as the meat grinder. Now it's a city in ruins. And in recent months, a fresh horror, the intensified air war waged on Ukrainian cities. Civilian deaths in July, the highest since the beginning of the war, the UN says, with 286 killed and 1,388 injured. Ukraine counts the human cost of Russia's war in Kyiv's Maidan Square. A flag for every fallen soldier. As Putin and Trump talk deals and land swaps in Alaska, Ukrainians fear all they have sacrificed could be traded away by leaders far from the front line.
Well, here at the Air Force Base in Anchorage, we are getting news and possibly even pictures that Air Force One is landing as we speak. Can we see it there? Air Force One landing about 11 minutes ahead of schedule, I think. And then we're expecting President Putin to land half an hour later. Let's see if he's also slightly early. All that followed by first a one-on-one meeting between the two of them, and then possibly all together, including with delegation, 7 hours of talks. The picture's just gone. So let's go back to Kathy in Kyiv. Kathy.
Thanks, Matt. Well, the latest figures from Ukraine's armed forces say there have now been just over 1,068,000 Russian casualties. That's the total number of those killed or injured on the battlefield. Well, joining me now is the Ukrainian MP, Alexander Mesko, who's chair of Ukraine's Foreign Relations Committee. Alexander Mesko, so Donald Trump has landed. Do you feel that we're closer to peace tonight than we have been since 2022? Or has Putin scored a victory just simply by having this meeting in the first place?
I would like to believe that we made a step closer to at least ceasefire, but unfortunately I have to be skeptical, knowing the previous history that Mr. Trump, unfortunately, he didn't deliver on his promise. So that's why I remain to be skeptical. Of course, I would like to be wrong. And we'll wait and see what will be the outcome. I'm afraid that there will be no outcome whatsoever. And maybe under the circumstances, it's not the best case scenario.
Right, no outcome whatsoever. I mean, it's a simple PR exercise, really, then.
It's quite possible, because in traditional diplomacy, if you have a summit, you're supposed to have in advance prepared agreement. And as a head of state, you come just to sign this, to finalize this agreement. But I doubt that there is such agreement already reached by Putin and Mr. Trump, and maybe it's more about PR. We can recall what happened with Trump's meeting with North Korean dictator. Also a meeting, summit without any tangible result.
Came to nothing. But then how does Volodymyr Zelenskyy play this then? I mean, assuming there is no ceasefire, that Putin doesn't agree to a ceasefire, as you suspect, does Zelenskyy say, hey, look, I'm up for a meeting, I'm going to go there and we can meet, we can have this trilateral meeting?
Yeah, we are prepared, and President Zelenskyy, of course, is prepared for all kinds of scenarios and eventualities. But if there will be a trilateral meeting, it's quite possible. But, you know, I personally have some concerns. I would like to see as participants in order, because you never know with Trump, he might align with Putin, who knows. But to prevent it from happening, I would like to see our European partners like Keir Starmer, for example, German Chancellor and French President. It would create some kind of guarantees that we will have objective discussion of serious issues.
Well, Donald Trump has confirmed that some sort of territorial concessions will be discussed. I mean, I've been seeing for myself today just the scale of Ukraine's suffering, the number of soldiers killed and the grief of the families whose relatives are missing. Does there come a point, no matter how hard it is, no matter how loath to admit it Zelenskyy is in public, that you have to consider some kind of territorial concessions in order to secure a peace, to stop the bloodshed?
Of course, we would like to have ceasefire, but not at the cost of destroying our country. Because it's not only about territory, it's about people. There are villages, there are towns, and we cannot sacrifice them, knowing that they will be what awaits them if Russians come and there will be regime of occupation. We saw it in Bucha, in Irpin. We don't want these people to be tortured, raped, murdered. That's why it's out of the question from moral point of view. But from legal point of view, it's equally impossible.
So when you have land swaps being sort of blithely discussed over the other side of the world, how does that go down here or with people in Russian-occupied territories in Ukraine?
Well, people, even those who are in favor of some kind of ceasefire, they are against of territorial concessions because they understand what's going to happen to these people. So it's absolutely out of the question. And besides, the very fact that Putin wants territorial concessions indicate that his troops bogged down. They are not capable to take these territories by military hand. They failed. That's why they're trying to do by using other means like negotiations.
But you've got this, you're pouring a huge number of reinforcements into Donetsk in the east, for example. I mean, the prospect is that you're going to lose a whole lot more soldiers. Can you really carry on with that? For how long?
We have to fight because, again, from Russian point of view, from perspective of Putin, it's not about extra territory. He's not after getting more territory. Russia is a huge country. They have enough territory. It's about subjugation and Ukraine in general. It's about erasing us as a nation from the map of the world.
Alexander Mesko, thank you very much for joining us. Well, let's go back now to Matt in Alaska, where Donald Trump is arriving.
Thank you, Kathy, there from Kyiv. Well, back here, things are getting quite exciting. Air Force One has not just landed, but it's taxied to its position from where Donald Trump will emerge at the door any minute now and step down to the red carpet and then probably say a word or two to the assembled media in the Air Force Base inside, about half a mile or so behind me. I'm standing at the gates here. And of course, for him, this is incredibly important because he promised to bring peace to Ukraine at every single campaign speech during the election last year. He said he would do it on day one. It's taken a little bit more than that. And today he has to deliver, and he does not want to be seen as someone who has been played a fool by Vladimir Putin. Now, the stakes really couldn't be higher. The diplomats really couldn't be sweatier. History is littered with summits like these, all with varying degrees of success and all with very worried teams behind their leaders about how they will handle it. A fear best explained perhaps with an anonymous verse that made the rounds in Whitehall in World War II. And so while the great ones depart to their dinner, the secretary stays, growing thinner and thinner, racking his brains to record and report what he thinks they think what they ought to have thought. Here's our international editor, Lindsay Hilson.
This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine.
Sometimes the enthusiasm that greets a peace deal agreed at a summit doesn't bear the test of history. So peace in our time became appeasement. And the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, who was so proud of it, went down in infamy. History shows the dangers of trust. Yet President Trump seems to trust President Putin. famously in Helsinki in 2018, saying he had more faith in the Russian leader's denial that he'd interfered in the 2016 US election than the evidence of his own security agencies.
I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today.
Meeting again today a man he has said he admires, Trump may or may not be reflecting on the history of summits.
The Crimean winter resort of Yalta was the place chosen.
Yalta in 1945 after World War II, when the big three, Churchill, Roosevelt and Stalin, carved up Europe between them.
And Churchill in a uniform which quite overlooked King's regulations.
Churchill, wearing a Russian Astrakhan hat, famously got on better with the Russian dictator than with the US president.
Churchill, at the back of his mind, he doesn't forget that this is a mass murderer, but actually he is interesting. Churchill's desire to meet Stalin, his almost need to meet Stalin, is similar to Trump's yearning to meet Putin again, because this is one of the big beasts of contemporary international politics.
But Stalin betrayed his promise to Churchill at Yalta that Eastern Europe could have free elections, and so the Cold War was born. Yesterday, the Ukrainian leader met the Prime Minister. Presidents Putin and Trump seem ready to dismember Ukraine with little input from President Zelenskyy and his European backers, just as the big three divided Europe at Yalta. Skilled in flattery, President Putin echoes back President Trump's words.
I can't disagree with him that if he had been president, if his victory had not been stolen in 2020, then maybe there would have been no crisis in Ukraine in 2022.
He has a grasp of detail and long-term strategy, while Trump just wants a quick win. Leaders tend to have great faith in their negotiating skills. Diplomats have a different perspective.
They're terrified about having leaders loose in a room talking to each other because goodness knows what these guys are going to get up to. The diplomats are usually greatly contemptuous in private in their diaries about the leader's ignorance of everything and really do not want these men let loose on international problems.
This week, Russian soldiers have raised their flag in more Ukrainian villages. European diplomats and some Americans fear that the former KGB agent will get the better of the former real estate magnate in Anchorage. And Ukraine will be the victim.
Well, here at the Air Force Base, we're of course waiting for Donald Trump to appear at the top of the steps leading to the door of Air Force One, which has just landed. But we just had a small moment of excitement because a massive black bear was seen walking along the perimeter fence, luckily on the other side of the fence to where we are. We'll try and show you a picture of that a little bit later. They did tell us to be bear aware. Well, at the moment, we're Russian bear aware, and we're very much Trump aware. And I cannot reiterate how important this meeting is for him. When you consider all the things that he's done in the last 6 months, Liberation Day, basically he's had his own way on the geopolitical stage, but now he will test his mettle and he'll be very closely watched when he meets Vladimir Putin. And perhaps as a sign of nervousness, he has included in his delegation his Foreign Secretary, Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and also Steve Witkoff, his special envoy. On the Russian side, there'll be Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, and someone else. So it'll be 3-on-3 in that first meeting, not 1-on-1, and perhaps that is quite indicative of what we can expect in the next few hours. Let's go back to Kathy in Kyiv. Kathy.
Stay alert, Matt. Well, earlier I spoke to Mikhail Kasyanov. He served as Prime Minister of Russia and is now an enemy of the Kremlin, branded a foreign agent by Russia's foreign ministry. As I asked him about his expectations from the peace summit, you'll hear the air raid sirens going off, warning of a Russian warplane in the air and an attack to the east. I began by asking him what the world could expect from the meeting between Trump and Putin today.
I think it's clear Mr. Putin wanted this meeting, and he is very much satisfied that with the format of the meeting would be tete-a-tete conversation, and the whole world will see that finally Putin was brought out of isolation and decide together with the President of the United States the fate of the world.
Mikhail, you can hear that Ukraine is still under bombardment. And it's interesting, isn't it, in the run-up to this peace meeting, Putin has been bombing Dnipro, for example. He's not let up on his attacks. What is the psychology of preparing for a peace meeting by bombarding your enemy once again?
First, Mr. Putin doesn't want to stop immediately all this offensive operation. And that's why he also demonstrates his readiness to get more and more, to occupy more and more territories of Ukraine. And of course, he understands that Mr. Trump wants the ceasefire. Mr. Putin believes that he could suggest something to Mr. Trump, which from Trump's perspective could be acceptable. That's what I can predict, that Mr. Putin would like to say yes for ceasefire, but subject to, for instance, lifting sanctions.
Trump says he understands Putin, that there's a mutual respect there, and that he thinks Putin wants a slice of America's wealth. I mean, I wonder, when you think back to George W. Bush saying he'd glimpsed Putin's soul, do American leaders understand Putin, or are they constantly sort of not working out quite what his motivation is?
Frankly, I don't think just Mr. Trump understands. Mr. Putin believes he could win this war of attrition he conducting already 3 years. And we know just what problems Ukraine face with the battlefield. They badly lacking just manpower on the battlefield. That's why Putin continued to press and believing that Ukrainian could accept everything, but he wants something just what would be acceptable for Mr. Trump. He doesn't want to make angry Mr. Trump. That's the issue number one for him.
So you think the prospect of a trilateral meeting in the coming days is pretty remote then?
I think there is no prospect at all.
So peace is really pie in the sky?
Yeah. Putin will be dragging out time. Mr. Trump already demonstrated on the previous month, just when Mr. Putin answered for his demand for unconditional ceasefire, Mr. Putin put just conditions. And Mr. Trump started to considering seriously conditions.
And you talked about Putin being rehabilitated in this meeting. He's no longer an international pariah. Is there any way in which he loses from this?
I don't think so. The fact of the meeting, that's already victory for Mr. Putin. It doesn't matter just much what his outcome will be. For Mr. Putin, that's important event, and he will switch on all Russian propaganda for Russian people. Main goal for Mr. Putin, keep power. It means to raise his legitimacy, he's lacking in Russia, to raise his legitimacy outside. Mr. Trump offers him this legitimacy. Mr. Putin will be enjoying this.
When you look at the spectacle of the red carpet being rolled out for Putin and Trump meeting on equal terms, what does that say about the way Putin and Trump see Ukraine and Europe more broadly?
Mr. Trump wants just to be seen by all people that he bringing peace. That's why ceasefire for him is the most important. All other aspects not necessarily important for Mr. Trump. That's how Mr. Putin reads this. That's why further negotiations and comprehensive peace agreement will be on the burden of European countries.
Mikhail Kasyanov, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, another war waiting for President Trump's intervention is, of course, Gaza, where there is no sign of peace or a ceasefire. Well, today the far-right Israeli cabinet minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has posted a brief video showing him confronting the high-profile Palestinian prisoner Marwan Barghouti in his cell. Mr. Barghouti is serving multiple life sentences after he was convicted of planning attacks that led to the deaths of 5 civilians. Our correspondent Darshan Soni is in Tel Aviv. Darshan.
The images of Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir humiliating a man regarded by many Palestinians as their Nelson Mandela has drawn a sharp reaction. The far-right politician has oversight of Israel's prisons, and he appears to have used his authority to visit Marwan Barghouti in his cell, make threatening remarks, record the visit and post a clip on social media. And in the video, he can be heard telling Barghouti, anyone who messes with the people of Israel, anyone who murders our children, our women, we will wipe him out. Now, the video is the first time that 66-year-old Barghouti, who appears frail and gaunt, has been seen for many years. He's serving 5 life sentences for planning suicide attacks against Israelis during the second Intifada or uprising. He always maintained that his trial was illegitimate. He was imprisoned 20 years ago, but Barghouti remains hugely influential. He's considered as one of the few people who could unite Palestinians behind a single leader. That's probably one of the many reasons why Israel has always refused to consider releasing him in their negotiations. In fact, the last time that his voice was publicly heard was on our programme. In 2006 on Channel 4 News, Lindsay Hilsum interviewed him in his cell. This is what he told her.
Israel succeeded to arrest my body, but not my head and not my soul. They will not succeed to do that. They will not broke our will for independence.
And Darshana, what's been the reaction to this?
Well, Barghouti's wife, Fadwa, said she didn't recognise him in the video at first because he looks so frail. She posted, "They are still, Marwan, pursuing you and following you, even in the solitary confinement cell where you've been living for the last 2 years." And she says the struggle against occupation and its symbols with you, Marwan, continues. Palestinian officials have condemned both Ben-Gvir's message and the condition that Barghouti appears in. They have said this is the height of psychological, moral and physical terrorism against prisoners. Now, it's not clear why Ben-Gvir has posted this video now. He hasn't publicly commented. The extremist ministry is known, of course, for making provocative statements. He served time in prison for anti-Arab sentiment. And, of course, he's been sanctioned by the UK for incitement of violence against Palestinians. But this video has come at a time when there has been international calls for the recognition of a Palestinian state.